Notebook number 4, 3. So it was April 1st, April Fool's Day. I waited all day for Miaojin to come by, and he showed up at the last minute. I was in my attic room on Tingzhou Road. He climbed the 5 flights and crawled through the skylight, clambering over the barbed wire fence around it. He made it all the way into the attic and knocked on my bedroom door. It was 11 p.m. This was about a year after he'd gotten into the philosophy program at my university. He'd scraped his hand on the barbed wire. "Hurry up, come on. April 1st is almost over. If we don't make it by midnight, we'll miss Chu Kwang. You know about our relationship, right? Come with me to see him. Otherwise, if we're left alone, one of us will wind up dead or injured." Wiping off the dried blood with his other hand, he flashed a grim smile, then bellowed, "Come on." Every 6 months or so, Miaojin would appear out of nowhere. The way he would show up, it was as if you were walking down a busy street and without warning someone came up and gave you a friendly slap on the back. Ever since I'd met him, I felt as if somewhere in the intricate workings of my subconscious, some part of my psyche, possibly my ego, was constantly waiting for him to arrive and get the fix that only he could give me. Miaojin led the way as we rushed to the dorm where Chu Kwang lived. When we discovered he wasn't there, we pedaled at full speed to Zongshan North Road and searched for him along a bar-lined strip. Spotting a pair of legs splayed out on the brick sidewalk, we found him underneath a bench. What made it even sillier was the fact that he'd worn a pristine white pair of jeans and a matching shirt. Drunkenly, he smiled at us. "Hey, I'm not even late this year. It's only 6 minutes to 12, Miaojin blurted out. As we carried Chu Kwang back to his room, Miaojin said they needed to have a talk and that I should join them. There was a menacing look on his note as he slipped each of Chu Kwang's 2 roommates a modest banknote, then told them to get out. It did the trick. And, as if the message had been imparted with the flick of a knife, they left quickly. Miaojin had an imposing manner that implied he could break your neck if he wanted to, and everyone knew it. I scanned the wall of books at the far end of the room. Wooden shelves had been built to accommodate the window, and the sections were neatly labeled. 80% of the books were in English, and among them were 2 giant anthologies of fiction and poetry. Each volume had Chu Kwang's name written on it. Though there were 4 beds in the room, Chu Kwang occupied the space of 2 people. A 3-shelf mahogany bookcase was used to divide the room in half. Cassettes and CDs were placed everywhere except on the bed, which was covered with a blanket. There was a separate shelf for the stereo, which had a medium-sized set of silver speakers, and underneath were 3 rows of vinyl records stored in protective sleeves. Medical textbooks were piled on his desk, on which copies of works by Byron, Keats, Yeats, and other English-language poets were tossed. Books aside, music-related items filled more than half the space of the room. He had hardly any other possessions. Miaojin returned with the green tea he'd made and lifted the cup to Chu Kwang's lips. He rocked Chu Kwang in his arms, slapping his face lightly. Then, kneeling and rolling up his sleeves, he started massaging him with a rhythmic, circular motion that escalated into full-on pounding. Chu Kwang laughed hysterically, pulling Miaojin toward him and pressing his forehead against his own. They were like 2 stones being struck together, the sparks intensifying with every blow. Finally, Miaojin pulled away. He sat in a chair and lit a cigarette. Chu Kwang let loose, the tears streaming down his chest. It was a grown man's howl loosed from a cave at the bottom of the ocean. I had never witnessed such a thing before in my life, nor would I ever forget it. As he abandoned himself to grief, the flood of tears seemed inexhaustible, too much for his body to endure, but even so, his weeping persisted with the courage of conviction. Though I was only a bystander, there was no way I could remain detached. My eyes silently welled over. A tear formed in the corner of Miaojin's eye, and he coldly wiped it away. It was cathartic for me, and neither of us felt pity for him. Tears, it seemed, had a life of their own. As dolphins hear the call of their shared language and must turn back towards their origins, The three of us found ourselves attuned to a common frequency. It was an experience too profound for words. "Well, that's enough for one day, isn't it?" Meng Sheng said to me as we all breathed a sigh of relief. "My thoughts exactly," I said. I felt as if the three of us were on the same wavelength. We'd experienced a collective consciousness, if only for a fleeting instant. We'd stormed the fortress gates and returned to a place where souls, having no physical form, freely intermingled. In that moment of wonder, there was no distance between us. "What day is it today anyway?" I asked, drying my eyes. "It's April 1st. Chu Kwang and I met 4 years ago on this day. I broke up with him 3 years ago, and he got into college. I still saw him after that, but less often. When we split, he asked me to always meet me on the 1st of April. He said if I missed a year or forgot, he'd die." "Is that a threat? What, is it ordained by some higher power?" I was skeptical. "No," Meng Sheng shook his head, rubbing his eye. "Maybe you've never experienced it. To him, I've taken on too great a meaning in his life, though I wouldn't say he's living for someone else. It's not that simple. He's been carrying all this pain and sadness his whole life. He was already like that at 18 when we met. One day he decided to take his own life, and I stopped him. He turned to look at Chu Kwang, who, having cried himself into a stupor, was now slumped against him. He stroked Chu Kwang's nose. What a drama that was. I didn't know him before that. I'd never even seen him. This was during my first year of high school, right after I went back. Chu Kwang was in his 3rd year. It was the night of April 1st, and I'd just gotten out of school. I was leaving when he walked past me. For a split second, I saw this young man's face magnified, like in a close-up. There, in that single expression, were all the feelings that had built up inside me that I couldn't express. The face of a moribund man, its lines formed by a lifetime of anguish. He was the quintessential victim. I followed him to the bus stop and got on the bus, got to the train station, transferred, took the train all the way to Keelung, and hopped on another bus. I sat next to him, but he didn't notice me. He hung his head and he was in a fog, completely oblivious. After he finally had to get off the bus, he walked to a secluded beach. I wasn't consciously trailing him this whole time. It was like sleepwalking. He had a magnetism, and I was drawn into his right. I was still far from the water, and a large rock was blocking my path. I moved it out of the way, and the next things I knew, I was wide awake. Something clicked, and I instantly caught up to him 30 feet ahead. I grabbed his arm and told him, "Don't die." And that was the moment he was reborn. He grinned and caressed Chu Kwang's hair. It was a stupid thing to say, though. At the end of the day, I have no right to tell other people what to do, especially after realizing what a head case he was. I got sick of using my own will to control someone else's. Grabbing him by the arm was acting without thinking. Gut instinct. After everything he'd gone through, he'd made the decision to assert his own will. I was the one who wanted him to live, but it wasn't my choice to make. What connection did we have, really, that would justify my saying those words? I've thought about it, and I'd hate to do, but I'd do it all over again. Meng Sheng put his head between his knees and twisted his hair in his hands. Chu Kwang sat up, gazing at him tenderly. "Meng Sheng, I trust you regardless. You don't know what death is really like and don't want to find out, so part of you is resisting death. And that part of you spoke up. That's all. You didn't want to let death in. Everyone has the same response," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that." Resisting death. That's what it comes down to. It's like you're on autopilot. No matter how much you hate life, your body doggedly resists death. Even other people aren't allowed to die. You still try to stop them. Meng Sheng scoffed. What a joke. So then what happened? I wanted to know how it had turned into this. Hey, it's my turn to talk. Chu Kwang's eyes were puffy and red, and he sounded hoarse and congested. When he grabbed me and said, "Don't die," I started bawling like I did just now. I was 2 grades ahead of him, but he was more mature than I was, in every way. He told me to stop crying and called a cab to take me home. In fact, he handled it like he was the older one. He made me talk about what made me wish I was dead. He acts tough, all right, but he has a sensitive side too. He appeared at my darkest hour when I wanted nothing more than to feel exactly that kind of masculine warmth inside of me. Do you follow me, sis? In his presence, I was a helpless little baby. I'd prayed for him, and now that he had come, I surrendered, willing to do anything he asked. I wished that he would snatch my soul or that I could have his body. Back in his room, he seemed to accept that he held this power over me, that I'd obey him. I couldn't stop crying. After listening, he cried too. He had all kinds of pent-up desires, and I could tell that they were boiling over. It was very real and very intense. He reached out to me in a way that neither of us had imagined. He reached over, and in one swift yet tender motion, removed my shirt and pants, and without a word, I submitted to him. That hand was shaking with emotion as it caressed me, so I took his hand and wrapped it around my cock. I don't know where that idea came from, but my will to live had found an outlet, which had materialized before my very eyes. What is a human race, anyway, but a multitude of outlets for desires? There's no suppressing the truths that arise from our experiences. Desires teach us lessons, and we have to go forth into the new worlds that we construct for ourselves. Chu Kwang's voice trembled. When you can't, that's when you die. The new worlds that we construct, I nodded. I knew exactly what he meant, but some desires, once formed, are impossible to fulfill, so they become frustrations instead. That's the problem with going forth into new worlds. By having another man grip your cock, you've gone beyond the perceived boundaries of your former world and delved into your carnal desires. You've retraced the roots of self-knowledge, experienced the primal frustrations, and transgressed the perceived boundaries, and you've managed to come back alive. I expounded on Chu Kwang's thoughts, which had stirred something within me. You've emerged from a primordial state with newly constructed schemata, and lo and behold, you're experiencing a whole new world, right? Hey, I really like you, sis, but why do you feel the same way too? Having recovered his composure, Chu Kwang seemed embarrassed at his outburst just a minute earlier. I didn't answer. So it was just a sudden impulse? It wasn't love? I asked. Meng Sheng had planted himself at the window and was staring out into the night. Later on, it really was love. The happiest time of my life was my final year of high school. We'd go on endless walks at the edge of town. Other times, we'd go to a deserted beach and watch the sunset or make love on the hot sand. I'd recite poetry or read plays out loud to him. He'd brazenly put his arm around me as we walked home. It was an illicit love, a thing so dangerous it refused to be contained, yet made of nothing but sweetness. But it had no future. Eventually, women entered the picture. At first, he hid the fact that he'd been chasing women. But his interest in me gradually waned, and I found out. He was shameless, spending all his time with women. He told me straight up that he was going on a date, that he'd come see me when he needed a fix. I loved him too much and let myself be treated badly. Once, he even taunted me by bringing a girl over to my place and making me hide in the bathroom, watching him put the moves on her. I stood on top of the toilet all night, peering through the window over the door until my leg fell asleep and every last detail was burned into my memory. I knew I was damaged goods, so I grabbed a pair of scissors and stabbed myself in the thigh, left arm, and stomach. Not deep, though. I managed not to cry out. I had to protect myself from the destructive side of his love. After I took the college exams, he broke it off completely. I was never going to satisfy him. The fact that he still needed a woman already adulterated our love. But being forced to watch the two of them was humiliating. I was living for someone else. I've given up hope that he'll ever love me again, that those dreams will ever come true, and I'm not really saying my love for him. There was a line between us. He was on one side, and as long as I wanted to be on the same side as him, that line was blurred. Meng Sheng was my only reference point. Chu Kwang rubbed his nose. Beads of sweat had formed around his mustache. Though he had stopped speaking, his mouth was twitching. His mannerisms could be comical, even when he was upset. Chu Kuang, don't you think I'm right? You need Meng Sheng to see you once a year. You're still leaving the line between life and death blurred. All you've done is taken the decision-making responsibility and passed it to him. Isn't that vindicative of you? Just hearing about these two and their entanglement was draining. Part of me wanted to get up and leave so that I could shut out the panorama of hazardous terrain that had just opened before my eyes. This world of embattled relationships. I wanted to retreat to the solitude of my desert, which, without Bleak, was tame compared to this. Meng Sheng cackled loudly, as if in response to my question. It was 2 a.m. We heard the sound of slippers shuffling downstairs in the lobby of the men's dormitory as the giant, broad-leaved trees swayed outside the window, their silhouettes graced by nocturnal melancholy. Meng Sheng had stripped off his clothes at some point and was now strutting around naked, making an ass of himself. Every once in a while, he'd swivel his hips in a womanly manner or alternately swing his dick around. But there was more to his acting out than a desire to break the rules or put on a display of vulgarity. It seemed offensive, as if he'd been hurt. Whoa, you're not offended, are you? How about if the 3 of us agree to have post-gender relations? I'm done talking about it. In the end, all 3 of us have been seriously warped by gender labels. Everybody has, more or less. The only difference is, we're the blessed children of Tripitaka. We'll talk about it later. Blushing, Chu Kuang extended his hand in a gesture of solidarity. Hey, we should found a gender-free society and monopolize all the public restrooms. I was elated at the idea. He didn't have to explain. He too could envision the manual I was writing about my own experiences. I decided to stop pressuring myself to state those experiences explicitly. If I couldn't, I wasn't going to let it bother me. I would speak up when the time was right. With these guys, it was about laying the foundations of trust. So about this problem, sis, Chu Kuang, both inquisitive and protective, took my hand. Making choices versus getting revenge. That's a deeper issue I haven't overcome. When I was 18 and ready to hurl myself into the ocean, I was in a bad place. That's how my therapist describes it. That ended after I turned 18. We still fight, though. Doesn't take much for us to start an argument. But when our fights get too intense, I slide back into the bad place. I lose control. For me, Meng Sheng is like this thing F. Scott Fitzgerald described in The Great Gatsby. A single green light, minute and far away, that might have been the end of a dock. Every day, he'd stare at the green light. If it went out, that meant hope was gone. It was his only point of reference. Know what I mean? Chu Kuang smiled sweetly. I felt an overwhelming urge to stroke his hair. He lowered his head into my lap, and Meng Sheng came over and curled up behind him. The tiniest beads of moisture formed on the tip of his nose. 4. Preface to The Secret Lives of Crocodiles. Based on the research of a central investigator who scaled mountains and forded rivers to locate the nearly 100-some crocodiles residing across the country, the lifestyle and characteristics of the average specimen are compiled herein. Amid a recent crocodile frenzy, one radical theologian has predicted that no prophet will emerge from among the crocodiles, and that the gods will see to it that they are all cast into a pit of flames. All things considered, it is indisputable that crocodiles, whether they are studied or scorned, warrant closer attention. Favorite TV shows: Hawaii 5-0, Variety 100, The 700 Club. Likes: A House Full of Lies, Lovers Talk, any housework that can be performed with one's tongue. Toilet habits: HCG brand toilets, with Sujay brand toilet paper. Wears: only the finest. Wakol. Hobbies: knitting with wool yarn. Mottos: those who believe will find salvation. God loves the common man. Since it was unemployed, the crocodile went for a stroll. At the bus stop by the payphone was a stack of pamphlets with the words, "The Light of Jesus Christ" on the cover, the mere sight of which frightened the crocodile out of its wits. Could it be that even Jesus himself was a crocodile watcher? The crocodile mischievously took out a red pen and ripped the first 6 pages from one copy. On the last page, it drew a giant red X, and in one fluid stroke inscribed the following words: "True, but don't feel bad. Even Jesus made a few mistakes." The crocodile placed the pamphlet face down on top of the stack so that it would serve as a corrected edition. It merged into the crowd that was piling onto the bus, and with a dimpled grin, watched in the rear view mirror as the bus stop receded into the distance. Nostalgia. A burly man bundled in a heavy coat. He struggles to lift the knitting needles in his right hand toward the ball of white yarn in his left. The classroom is filled with the chattering of schoolgirls as they learn to knit. In solitude, the burly man, deeply engrossed in his stitches, wipes his sweat from his brow. The camera zooms out, and the depth of field expands. On the second floor are an aristocratic couple dressed in formal attire. The gentleman's hands are folded across his stomach, and the lady has put her arm through his. The sound of the symphony swells, resplendent and exalted. The burly man has grown thin. His coat now fits him loosely as he persists in knitting. Hunched over, he mumbles to himself as a ball of yarn unravels, revealing a white wool scarf in progress. As the camera zooms out, the frame widens to capture the ruins of an ancient facade. Built for the spectacle of pageantry of sports, the 3-story Colosseum was at one time filled with the noise and clamor of crowds. On the arena floor is a once burly man, now gaunt as a stick, who, in isolation, has knitted a fluffy white dog. Snowflakes land on its fur coat. That's Tarkovsky. 5. I lived on Tingzhou Road during my second semester in 1989. It was right before I turned 20. 20. I was stuck in a rut and feeling hopeless. I couldn't go on. Life didn't feel real. My reality was the occasional call from family, the 20 classes a week that kept me glued to a desk, the coming and going of nameless faces in the classroom, taking tests between the ringing of bells, sitting on a table in the student organization offices and goofing around, making plans to hang out with people from my classes. I packed my eating schedule with private tutoring and playwriting workshops. Every once in a while, I'd meet people who got me and we'd hit it off. But even so, what good did it do to me? Joining the group meant I'd either be the one who mixed things up or I'd get lost in the jumble. In reality, I'd always be relegated to the margins. I forced myself to put one foot in front of the other, reminding myself that there was a place for me out there in those moments of happiness, even if I was a different person at home, someone who went to bed shit-faced. It reminded me of a scene out of Somerset Maugham's memoirs. My life was extraordinarily lacking in all sense of reality, as if I were watching a different me playing various characters within a mirage. I wanted to be kicked out into reality so badly. In May, the club president was relieved of her post. By then, Van Gogh's The Potato Eaters had come to life. The painting shows 4 gloomy faces under a dim light, figures with dark circles under their eyes, sitting around a table in a cellar, divvying up the potatoes. At the changeover ceremony, Toon Toon and Chu Kwang sat in the front row, grinning at me. Ziru didn't go. I'd latched on to the club for dear life in the year following my split from Shuiling. I'd fled the jaws of reality and become the painting's central figure, the 5th one, whose back was turned. Whether I was delivering a rambling speech or serving potatoes, I reeked of a degenerative disease of the spirit, the result of having been sequestered for too long. The layer of glass had grown thicker and harder to shatter. Life had drained me. My 20th birthday, I was in a bad place, and death was a speck on the horizon. The night before my birthday, I took 2 years' worth of journals from college and packed them with Shuiling's letters, a copy of Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood, and Daddy's credit card, and I took the night train to Kaohsiung. The white light of the station sign flooded my vision as I passed the stop for my home. Inside the train, I felt as if I were being whisked away by the wind, and tears filled my eyes. It was after 1 a.m. when I arrived in Kaohsiung and lumbered over to the hotel, where I stayed in room 514. The facilities were brand new, the bedsheets were clean, and the carpet was royal blue. There were other amenities: a white refrigerator, a TV, a stereo, a vanity mirror, toilet seat liners. Splayed out on the bed, I picked up and examined one of the neatly arranged pieces of the Ice Queen, her name being 2 strokes shy of being exactly that, and opened it. July 21st, 1988. As you read this, you probably resent me and wonder why I'm writing to you, why I won't leave you alone, or maybe you're sick of my being evasive and immature. But that won't be the case this time. Just listen. I'm here to confess. Since you think we need to have a talk, it shouldn't be asking too much for you to sit back and listen. In the end, it won't affect you. The only connection between us is the old you, and I can talk to her whenever I want. All I'm asking you to do is open this letter and read it to the end. Someday, when you meet someone who's living in a prison, you can remember how I was once imprisoned by you. After you left, I was overflowing with love that nobody wanted. You left me standing in the cold, with only you in my heart and nowhere else to turn. I can't say I never thought of running off with whoever was convenient, but I never did because everyone else seemed so inferior. I felt that if I let anyone else into my heart for even a second, it would sully the love we'd shared. I'd never be able to live with myself. I couldn't hate you or stop loving you. And that was only the beginning. It was impossible to hate you, though I tried. I knew there was no hope of running away or winning you back, but I still waited right where you left me. I imagined there was a completely new you who met my needs, that my love was requited. That way, I was never lonely in a crowd. I was just another woman in love, lost in a daydream. My tragedy began when you left. I felt like a child abandoned by her father, facing a hard road ahead. My love has only grown stronger, leaving me helpless, just like you predicted. I didn't know what you were to me until it was too late. I wasn't like you. I always knew it was love. That I should love while I could and prepare myself to no longer be able to love. Only I was confused by my attraction to you. The moment I experienced your tender side, I gave myself completely. That's why it hurt so much that your cruel side took my love and never returned it. Though I don't understand how that's considered love on your part, I'm not negating it either. I guess everyone has a different way of expressing their love. No matter how it comes out, it always finds its way to the person it was meant for. I just didn't know, or care, if it would last. Tell me, just this once, if you still think of me, and let me recklessly, tenderly tell you one more time, I love you. I've lost Naoko. Her beautiful flesh has vanished from this world. My leaden heart cracked open with sadness, and raging waves submerged the embankment. End of Notebook 4.